Oh, I hate being sick. Can't make YouTube videos the way I usually do like this. If only there was some way to make highly engaging and clickable videos without having to put in all the effort of script writing and all of that stuff. That's it!
Tier lists! Everyone likes tier lists. They're great ways to engage with the community you love while sharing your opinions with pretty minimal effort.
They're also a great way to promote my new podcast, Rank Masters, which you should go check out after this video. After. Don't go now. Don't go. Finish this video first.
Plus, this tier list in particular could be a really fun way to share my experiences with some pretty obscure, but still interesting games that most of you probably haven't played. So, let's get started with the Pokémon Stadium tier list. Alright, so it's Stadium 1 in A tier, and Stadium 2 in B tier. And that's it, apparently. Okay, maybe ranking the Pokémon Stadium games themselves isn't a good idea. There's only 2 of them, both released for Nintendo 64, and while they're pretty cool in my opinion, the main Nintendo way to play them is just normal Pokemon with 3D animations and a voice-acted announcer. The battle system is pretty cool, and I think it's neat that both games let you interface with your actual Pokemon team via the N64 transfer pack, or use a rental team that pre-built Pokemon, but it's still just battling. That's kinda boring to do in a tier list on its own, but thankfully, there are more ways to play the Stadium games than just the main intended mode. Both Pokémon Stadium 1 and 2 came with a minigame mode, and that mode was the bomb! The first game came with 9 regular minigames featuring Gen 1 Pokémon, all of which could be played within a matter of minutes and by up to 4 players. The minigames were pretty clearly inspired by Mario Party, but I love Mario Party, so I can't complain. By the time Gen 2 rolled around and they decided to release a second Pokémon Stadium, it's pretty clear that they knew the minigames rocked. So, they included a total of 12 regular minigames and a special Pokemon quiz minigame, again all playable by up to 4 players. As a kid, these minigames were honestly far more enjoyable to me than the main gameplay mode, and that's still absolutely true today. However, not every minigame is made equal. Some were always worse than others, some used to be great but just don't hold up to the standards of game design today, and others are still phenomenal minigames that have gone on to inspire mobile games some people still play today. So, let's rank them all! And who knows, maybe down the line I'll get Trace to react to my ranking on our podcast, Rank Masters. I have to promote this, dude. It's a new thing, I'm very excited about it, okay? And here's the actual fun part of the video, where I put all the things in an actual, real tier list. All the video before this was scripted, in case you couldn't tell, and this part is not scripted. These are going to be my actual spur-of-the-moment opinions on each of these minigames, so this is gonna be fun. First off is Magikarp Splash. Now, the way this game was played in Pokemon Stadium is that you just press A lot. The goal of Magikarp Splash is to jump high enough to hit the counter as many times as you can within a certain time period, and specifically, more times than all your opponents. Given that there's literally only one button to control this game, you would think that it's boring, but it's surprisingly complex and fun. Not too complex, obviously, it's only one button, but the amount of time that you press the A button heavily influences the height that you get, and if you don't press it long enough to get the counter, you don't get a count for that jump, and you've just wasted a jump. Also, this game doesn't have a buffer system, so if you jump too early, like if you press the button before your Magikarp is landed, you don't jump, and you're just stuck there, holding onto the A button, thinking, why am I holding onto the A button? Why did I press this if nothing's happening? Shoot, I pressed it too early, and then by the time you realize that, all your opponents have had a chance to jump too. So you have to be really good with the timing, and also holding onto the jump button just long enough as necessary, which makes it mildly more complex than I think anyone expected out of a Magikarp jumping game. So I'm gonna go ahead, I think I'm going to put it in the B tier, because again, it's pretty simple, but more complexity than people were expecting. I think it's a fun game. Up next is the single most iconic game in the Pokemon Stadium series. Clefairy says, I don't think I need to explain why this is such a fun game, but literally anyone who's ever played Stadium 1 knows precisely why I'm putting this in S tier. Clefairy says is just a fun, it's so fun and so stressful. It's literally a minigame where Clefairy, at the front of the class says, hey, repeat after me, and then says the following directions while a cute tone plays, and then you have to put in those directions. Everyone's directions, they're revealed at the same time, and if you mess up once, you get donked big time, and it starts off simple. It starts off with literally only 4 commands, but it gets really complex by the end of it. It is a big chain of, commands to remember. For adults, it's definitely not that hard. I think most of us have better memories than we did when we were kids, but even today, I kind of struggled with some of it. I'm not gonna lie. That said, it is by far the most iconic game in the series, so it has to go in S tier. Run Rattata Run. This was the third game in Stadium 1, and it was pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie. The controls were different than I remember them being. If that makes sense. Like, I remember the controls being more intuitive when I was a kid, but, like, looking at it now, looking at what the controls are, like, it doesn't really make that much sense. You press the A button to run, and that kind of makes sense. You have to spam it as fast as possible, but then you press up on the D-pad to jump, and that's a strange thing, especially when you consider that the Nintendo 64 controller looked like this, so the D-pad was way over here, and the A button was over here, so you were holding it like this. And that's just not how this like, this feels more intuitive for the Nintendo, like, for a normal controller, but the Nintendo 64 was meant to be held like this. Held like this. You could tell I'm still tired and sick. I will say that's one of the cool things about the Stadium minigames is that they require all sorts of different control schemes, but I feel like this control scheme was not like, it didn't make a lot of sense. Like, why was A button the run and up on the D-pad jump? Why not have B button be run and A jump or something like that? Also, for some reason, this minigame in particular has significantly more, like, delay on the jump than any other Stadium minigame, and I don't know why. I originally thought that it was just, like, an issue with my emulator, where, like, the input delay was heavier than it should have been, but no, it was specifically the Rattata game. So I think there's just a built-in delay, so you have to press the jump button as soon as you can, or you will run into every single hurdle. However, I do like the camera on this game. I think that's pretty neat, how it just kind of rotates around the whole, like, arena. I don't know, I thought that was pretty neat. Good use of the 3D mechanics. I think I'm gonna go ahead and put it in C tier because the controls were wonky as hell, but it wasn't a bad game. Like, it was alright. It was a decent game. The camera made it pretty cool. Number 4, Snore War. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it does. This is another one of those one-button games where you just press A, but this one is much more focused on the timing than the Magikarp jump was. For this one, each player controls a Drowsy using hypnosis on the other Drowsies, trying to make them fall asleep, and if you can only use hypnosis when the metronome is in the middle of the thing. The metronome speeds up over time, to the point where it's almost impossible to keep up with it, which I think is really funny. Like, at the end of it, it starts off pretty simple, where everyone's just getting every single hypnosis off, but by the end of it, everyone is just completely failing, and it's so funny seeing, like, you're just spamming the A button as fast as you can. I like this game a lot. I think the theming of it is also pretty darn cool. I like the aesthetic that the music provides and the visuals. All of it's pretty rad. I'm gonna put it in the same tier as the Magikarp Splash one, just because, again, controls are pretty simple, but it's fun. The theming of it's fun. I like the overall structure of just everyone going absolutely crazy by the end of it, until only one person can have slightly more accuracy than all the rest. That's neat to me. Thundering Dynamo. This one is actually, I think this was my least favorite of the Stadium 1 games. I have to put it in D tier because I really dislike it. The way Thundering Dynamo works is it's a spam game, where you would have a big machine in the middle light up either blue or green. And if it's blue, you spam the A button because the A button is blue, and if it's green, you spam the B button because the B button is green. Problem is that there's no real, like, telegraphing of what button is about to come up next, and if you press the wrong button, you wind up losing some of the energy you've built up, which, because there's no telegraphing, and because you're spamming the button as fast as you can, you don't have time to react to when the color changes, which means literally everyone just presses the wrong button at least a handful of times, and before they have the opportunity to switch to the other button. I think this is neat in concept, but the fact that it's literally just a mashing game, and one that you can't even react to properly, you just have to mash the correct button. I don't know. As far as the Stadium 1 minigames go, this one does not fit the bill of all the rest. Thankfully, it's saved by the following game, Sushi Go Round, which is so hilarious. I do think Sushi Go Round is the most complex of the Stadium 1 games. Basically, this game has a merry-go-round with a ton of sushi on it, hence the name Sushi Go Round. Every player plays as a Lickitung, and their goal is to eat not the most amount of sushi, but the sushi that cost the most. Basically, everyone's on a timer, and they're competing for the same sushi. Each sushi cost a different amount, and if your goal is to rack up the highest bill, so that your trainer just goes absolutely broke paying for your food. Conceptually, I think that's really funny. Mechanically, too, I think this game is really, really cool. Every item on the merry-go-round has a different value associated with it, and if you collect multiple of the same item, the value of that item then increases exponentially. Is it exponentially? No. It gets multiplied by the amount of items you collected. If you eat just one of the $1,000 sushi, that gets you 1,000 points. But if you eat 2 of the $500 sushi in a row, so like the first one is worth 500, but then the second one is 500 doubled. So you get 1,000 for that, which means 2 500 sushi is actually more than 1,000 sushi. And if you wind up getting 3 of the 500 sushi, that third one is now 3 times 500, which is 1,500, plus the 1,000, plus the 500. So it really stacks up if you wind up only collecting one type. So you can be really strategic with only going for the specific type of sushi, but then you can also get like competitive because you and the other Lickitung are fighting over the individual pieces of sushi, which means they might try to snag the thing that you're going for first. Alternatively, if you're not being strategic, there are ways to kind of punish you for not knowing what you're getting, because there are certain items that can send you into a frenzy because it's too spicy or something like that. Can send you running around the room and have it so that you literally can't control your character, which is definitely a big punishment. So I think overall, this game goes in S tier. Ekans' Hoop Hurl. And I don't know if it's Ekans or just Ekans', because it has the apostrophe after it. It's the Hoop Hurl belongs to Ekans. Anyway, this is another one of those games that's controlled really weirdly because you aim with the D-pad looking left and right, and then you use the control stick to kind of control the strength with which you throw your Ekans. And that's a really, like, holding your Nintendo 64 controller like this is really weird to begin with, but also just like controlling your aim with a D-pad just doesn't make too much sense to me. I understand you needed to use the control stick for flick power, but you could have just used that for the aim too. However, despite the controls being a little bit funky, this game is so much fun. Basically, a ton of Diglets come up, and your goal is to throw the Ekans onto each Diglet. The Diglets earn you points, and the golden Diglets, which occasionally show up, are worth 3 points. And it's so funny every time a golden Diglet comes up, because literally every player immediately tries to gun for the golden Diglet, and you can knock each other out of the way, which means that like everyone just kind of collides on the Diglett, and only one person successfully gets it. Everyone else just completely wasted their throw. And these throws, they take a while, you know? If you miss, you are punished for missing. So it's a fun game. I really enjoy it. The controls are stupid, but the game's still fun in spite of that. I think this goes in the A tier. It's not quite the same as Clefairy Says or Sushi Go Round, but oh, it's still pretty fun. I like it a lot. Rock Harden. This is another pretty simple game. It's just one button. You press the A button to harden your Metapod or Kakuna. The goal of this game, it's pretty funny because you have a ton of rocks being thrown at you, and you have a limited amount of stamina. Now, you can either use some of that stamina to use the move Harden, and Harden will protect you from the rock, basically. So if you get hit in the head with a boulder while using Harden, you don't take any damage from it. However, if you wind up getting hit by the boulder, it takes out a pretty significant chunk of your stamina. However, the longer you use Harden, the more stamina it starts to burn. Like, I don't know what the rate is. It almost looks like 1 pixel per, I don't know, almost looks like 5 pixels per second. I don't really know how to measure this kind of stuff. But either way, it's basically just a game of chicken. It's a question of how quickly and shortly can you hold on to the Harden button so as to not burn more stamina than you would have lost by getting hit. And that's an interesting kind of balance, because you don't want to press it too early because that's burning unnecessary stamina, but if you press it too late, you get hit by the rock. And if you hold on to it for too long after the rock hits you, that's also burning more stamina. So it could really get chaotic. And it's not a you versus other players kind of thing. It's really just a you versus yourself kind of thing, which does bring it down a little bit on my opinion. I think this goes right here with the Run Rattata Run. I think it's along the lines of that. It's not as good as the ones above it. It's still pretty fun. It's better than Thundering Dynamo. I really don't like Thundering Dynamo. And the last game on the Stadium 1 list is actually Dig Dig Dig. It's the game where all players play a Sandshrew, and their goal is to dig down into the deserts until they find water. Whoever finds water first wins. Control-wise, this game makes a ton of sense to me. You dig by pressing L and then R, and then L and then R, and you try to press it as fast as you can. But the thing is, if you press the same button twice in a row, so if you wind up pressing R and then R, you stop digging completely. You are taken out of the game for like a solid 2 seconds, which is a lot of time in this game. So it winds up being a question of how fast can you press L and R without pressing the same button twice. You don't want to make a mistake on this one, because one mistake can put you out of it. So is it worth slowing down and being deliberate with your movements, making sure you press them in succession? Or is it worth just going as fast as you can and hoping you don't make a mistake with it? That's a neat question. Again, this is one of those where you're really just competing with yourself and your own ability. It's not timed, but everyone else has kind of their own ability. We're not directly influencing each other's performance. For that, I think this goes about at a B. In case you couldn't tell, I like the Lickitung one and the Ekans Hoopearl. I love those because your actions influence the ability of other players to compete. Like if you take a sushi in the Sushi Go Round, that's an Asushi that someone else can't take. If you wind up getting a Diglett, that is a point that other players could have been aiming for, and they might have just wasted a throw. I like those. I like the ones where you directly influence other players. And there are a lot more of those in Stadium 2. Holy cow. So, Stadium 2, I'm going to get started with the regular minigames, and I'll put the quiz last, because I have a lot of thoughts on the quiz. But Gusty Golbat is the first game on Stadium 2. And oh, this one's a beast. The way Gusty Golbat works is you're trying to collect as many hearts as you can for the Jinx at the end of the level. And the way you get hearts is by running into them as they suddenly flow into the cave. However, you can lose hearts. You can either lose hearts by running into one, I think it's a Magnetric, something, Magnemite. It's a Magnemite, I just looked it up. So there are a ton of Magnemites in the cave, and then also, if you get bumped into by another Golbat that's flying faster than you lose a heart. Which means it just winds up being this chaotic mess of all the players trying to clash into each other and knock hearts out of the other players while collecting hearts themselves. So it is a chaotic mess. It is so much fun. There is a decent amount of skill to it, but honestly, a less skilled player can still win if they're just holding on correctly. So I think for the absolute, just the chaotic mess of it, it's got to go in A tier. I like this one a lot. Topsy-Turvy. This one, it's kind of like Beyblade. If that makes sense. All players play as a Hitmontop, and they enter into arena trying to spin all the other players out. Much like with the Gusty Golbat one, where it's a chaotic frenzy of everyone bumping into each other, this one is also a chaotic frenzy of everyone bumping into each other. However, your goal is to knock other players out a total of 5 times. And you can do this by just bumping into them normally, or by pressing A and using some sort of spin attack. Let me check real quick. Yeah, if you press A, you use Rapid Spin, which makes you spin even faster and makes it basically a guarantee that if you run into someone and they're not also using Rapid Spin, they just get sent flying out of the arena. And because your goal is to knock other players out 5 times, you're more focused on hitting other players than you are trying to not get knocked out. And I think that's an interesting balanced decision, is it encourages more aggression as opposed to just trying to focus on survival. Like, I've seen a lot of games similar to this where your goal is to not get knocked out 5 times or something like that. And like, you have 5 lives and each time you get knocked out. No, like in this one, you can get knocked out as many times as you want. You can even just head directly out. I've done that a few times, completely on accident, where I was just holding too hard in the direction and I didn't even get hit. I just went out of the arena. You don't lose points for getting out, you just lose time for getting out. You lose opportunities of knocking other players out. And that's an interesting decision because it encourages as much aggression as possible. I think this one's a ton of fun. I think this one actually goes in S tier. I like this one a lot more than Gusty Golbat because of the aggression it encourages. Like with the Gusty Golbat, you want to be defensive and kind of hold on to the hearts you collect. With this one, there is no defense. It's just kill, 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 kill. I love it. It's so funny. Clear Cut Challenge. This is a this is a hard one to really think about because I don't like this one very much, but mainly due to its scoring. All right, so the way this challenge works, you can play as a Scyther or a Pinsir. Also, if you have if you have your own copy of like Pokemon Gold or Pokemon Silver connected to the game, you can use a scissor. However, I didn't do that. I use Scyther and Pinsir, whichever one it gave me. It was random. But the way this one works is it's a timing challenge. You just press A at the right time, based on when a log falls in front of your Pokemon. Your goal is to press A to cut the log as close to the white line as possible, which makes sense. You know, it's a timing challenge. You want to get as close to the correct time as possible. However, my biggest complaint with it is that the way it's scored doesn't align with the actual goal of the game, in my opinion. This game is scored such that if you cut before the line, you earn points. The closer to the line you are, the more points you earn, but as long as you are before the line, you earn some points. And if you are after the line, you lose points. So even if you are like a millimeter away from the white line, if it's afterward, you lose a point, and if it's beforehand, you earn like 19 points. You earn a boatload of points if you get close early, but you lose points if you get close late. So it always encourages you to go early. And I don't like that. I think what this winds up doing is just encouraging people to cut as early as you can, and not actually align your cuts with, you know, the goal of the game. You don't get your cuts as close to the white line as possible. You just wind up getting your cuts early. That's not really fun. I'm not keen on that. I think this might be down in the D. This might be down with Thundering Dynamo. I don't like this at all. Conceptually, it could have been cool. I think if they just scored it differently. And I don't know, some other people really might like the scoring system. I do think it's interesting, but it just winds up encouraging a very passive early playstyle. Now, what is fun to me is Furret's Frolic. This one, I know already this one goes up in the S tier. This one's just phenomenal. Furret's Frolic is a game where everyone plays as Furrets. You're sort of in a 3x3 grid, but you can only be locked into the 4 cardinal directions and the center. And the cool gimmick of this one is that the game just tosses a bunch of Pokeball toys into the kind of grid, and your goal is to try and knock all of the balls, or as many of the balls as you can, into your goal zone. So it's basically like playing 4-player soccer, like if there were 4 teams. I realize I'm not doing this justice with how I'm verbalizing this, so just watch the gameplay real quick. It is so much fun, because it just, everyone bounces the balls in different directions, and instead of playing defense, you're not trying to kind of keep the balls from getting into the side that you're protecting. It's more... This again, it encourages aggression, where your goal is to get as many balls into the goal that you want as possible. It's so fun. This is ridiculously fun. I think, honestly, I might make a second tier just for this game, because this one, it's so good. I love Furret's Frolic. I love not being able to talk. Talking is hard. Barrier Ball. This is another game that conceptually is very similar to Furret's Frolic, but in actual execution, I think fails in pretty spectacular ways. Much like Furret's Frolic, you play as a Pokemon, and you're trying to get balls into any goal. So instead of just one specific goal, you're trying to get your balls into any of the 3 other goals available. You can move left and right, you can press the A button to kind of push your barrier forward, and if there are any balls there, it pushes them forward as well. Whoever touched a ball last winds up getting a point if that ball goes into any of the goals, and whoever's goal it goes into winds up losing a point, unless they're at 0, in which case they just stay at 0. My biggest problem with this game is just how slow it is. I think conceptually this could have been good if it were faster, if it were more chaotic like Furret's Frolic, but the problem is it's so slow, and like the balls are so telegraphed that it's... If you wind up failing, you feel like you're a loser for it, as opposed to if you wind up winning, anytime you get a point, it doesn't feel earned, and anytime you lose a point, it feels like you messed up big time. And that's just not... I feel like that's not very fun in terms of actual minigame play. So I'm going to put this down in D tier. It's boring. I don't like this one a lot. Pichu's Power Plant. This one is just Thundering Dynamo, but with heavy improvements. Mechanically, it's the same thing, where you want to press A, you want to mash the A button or mash the B button as fast as you can, based on what light is available. However, this one fixes my biggest problem with Thundering Dynamo, is that it gives you time to react whenever the light changes, because the previous light is still around when the new light comes up. And the way they manage this is they make it so that you're also using the D-pad to control the angle at which you need to press the button. So instead of just spamming the A button or spamming the B button and trying to react to it whenever the light changes, now you're spamming the A button to the right, and then whenever something new pops up, say like it's a B button to the B button down, the A button to the right is still there for a short period of time, and you have time to think and process and then press down on the D-pad and then start mashing the B button before the A button goes away. So you have time to change and react to whenever new things happen. So if you're skilled and have a good reaction, you can just correctly mash the entire game, and I think this makes the game significantly more skilled than Thundering Dynamo. However, it's still just a problem of, okay, you're not really competing with other players, you're not impacting the other players at all, it's just how quickly can you react to your own situation. It's significantly better than Thundering Dynamo. I don't think it's up there in the A and S tiers. I think I'm going to put it right here with the B tier as well, just because it's good. They made Thundering Dynamo a good game, but it's still fundamentally broken. It's still not as good as the other games on this list. Rampage Rollout. Oh, this one. This one's chaotic. I feel like I'm saying that about all the games I enjoyed, is that they're really chaotic. But Rampage Rollout, you play as a Dawn fan, and your goal is to race around a very standard track 5 times. And you'd think, okay, you're just running around in circles. It's pretty boring. That doesn't sound very fun. Sorry, I said 5. It's actually 9 laps. You do 9 laps around the track. But, however, depending on your placement, each time you pass the finish line for that lap, you get a certain amount of dust clouds. So if you're in last place, you get 3 dust clouds. If you're in first place, you get 0. Second gets 1. Third gets 2. And your goal is to kind of place those dust clouds in a way where they're going to screw up all the other players. And that is really funny to me, because it just winds up being a challenge of strategically placing your dust clouds while also trying to like navigate around the dust clouds that other players placed. And it gets messy and chaotic and very hard to keep track of, because oftentimes you are like sticking right there with all the other players, and if whoever is ahead of you winds up just pressing the button, you are immediately caught up. My big complaints with it is just that the hitboxes for the dust clouds do not make sense. Like, they are a lot larger than the actual visuals of the dust cloud themselves, which can make it very, very difficult to deal with. However, fun game, super chaotic. It's not quite S tier, but I do think it's A tier. I think it definitely belongs in A tier. Streaming Stampede. This one is literally just a Mario Party minigame. I don't know the name of the Mario Party minigame, but it's the one where you count a certain amount of enemies. It's literally that. You just press A every time you see a given enemy on screen, and then you try to count however many of them ran across the room. You play as Cleffa and Igglybuff, and it's kind of themed around like doing this on a live stream, which conceptually funny. Not 100% sure why. It doesn't really fit with the theme of the actual challenge itself. My biggest problem with this one, okay, I actually have 2 kind of big problems with this one. One is that it's pretty simple. It's literally just counting. Your goal is to count however many of a certain Pokemon come on screen, and that's not very hard. Like, if you've ever played that Mario Party one, I say they're one, but like there's multiple Mario Party minigames that are exactly like this, basically. So you know how simple it can be and how easy it can be, especially for adults. I imagine it would be harder for kids, but I never had a problem with it as a kid. In terms of actual difficulty, it's pretty simple, but in terms of mechanical difficulty, for some reason, I always struggle with this one. The number of times I press the A button is not the number of times that, like, my counter says at the end of it, and I don't know why. I think that anytime you press the A button, you are limited, and you can't press if you press the A button again, it doesn't count it for some reason, and that it gets frustrating, because, like, in my head, I have a certain number, and when it reveals all the numbers at the end of each round, the number in my head is not aligned with the number that that my character says. And it makes this disconnect, because, like, I know I pressed the button 24 times, but the screen says 22 or something like that. And I'm like, that's dumb. I don't like that mechanic. And I think that might have just been an issue with the Nintendo 64. Like, again, this is an old game. Let's be real here. It should have been set up in a way where you don't have to take it slow. Like, you should be able to just press the button anytime you see the Pokemon on screen and react in time. And that disconnect between the number represented in game and the number I actually pressed the button it hurts this game so much. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this one in C. I think if that were fixed, it would be maybe a B, because even then it's not that fun. But the brokenness of the counting is not quite. It brings it down a peg, for sure. Tumbling Togepi. This is a direct improvement over Run Rattata Run from the first game, and I like it. I think this is significantly better than Run Rattata Run. This time, instead of just spamming the A button and trying to jump whenever you encounter an obstacle, you have actual control over your movement. So your goal is to go from left to right or stay in the middle and try and avoid the obstacles that way. And I think that makes this much more fun because you're more directly engaged in how the game functions. Also, you can kind of roll into speed boosts, which will make the game much more complicated. It will make it much more difficult, but it's worth the risk. So you can make those risk-reward decisions as to whether or not you want to get into speed boosts or if you want to just avoid obstacles. I like this a lot. I think this is significantly better than Run Rattata Run. It's not quite a perfect game because, again, you're not really interacting with other players, but it is up there in the A tier. I think this one this one and the Clefairy Says are like the only games where your performance does not influence other players in A or S tier. And I think that's really funny. That should show kind of how my brain works in regard to these games. Speaking of games where you influence other players, we have Delibird's Delivery, which this one is just a clear... It's directly inspired by Sushi Go Round, kind of like how the Pichu's Power Plant was inspired by Thundering Dynamo, or how the Togepi is... Whatever, I literally just said it. How did I forget what it was called? Tumbling Togepi was inspired by Run Rattata Run. However, this one, I'm not sure if this one was an improvement. I think this one might have actually gotten worse. Not that much worse. It's still a pretty fun game. The way Delibird's Delivery works is that instead of sushi, your goal is to kind of go down on the screen and pick up toys, presents for children and stuff. And they could be pretty much anything, ranging from Nintendo 64s, which I think is pretty funny, to like a Snorlax plush. And your goal is to collect, you can collect up to 5 toys, bring it up to the top. Certain toys have certain worth. Your goal is to get the most amount of worth. So it's very similar to the Sushi Go Round in that mechanic. My biggest beef with this one, I don't think it's actually a problem. It's just that it's not as limited as the Sushi Go Round one, because with this one you have to go down and then go back up. You have to go away from where the presents are coming, which means that you're not really competing with the other players nearly as much. Now, to supplement this, they make it so that only 5 presents kind of spawn at a time, and you can only hold 5 presents, and the amount of presents you hold slows you down. Because of that, you wind up spending more time just kind of walking between the top and bottom areas than you do actually collecting the presents that you're trying to get. Which, with the Lickitung one, you are constantly on that sushi. You are constantly trying to collect as much sushi as you can, which means you are constantly in the way of other players. And I think that made the Sushi Go Round much more fun than the Delibird game. I think Delibird is still pretty darn fun. It's maybe not A tier, it might be B tier. It's going to be like a high B tier. I'll rearrange within tiers later. I like the competition aspect of it, but I don't like just how slow it feels. And I don't like that you're not really spending as much time competing with other players as you were in the Lickitung version of it. Next up, we have Egg Emergency, and this one, it's another one of those where your performance doesn't really impact other players. It's literally just try to catch as many eggs as you can. You play as a Chansey, and instead of using the joystick, you use the L and R buttons, which I think is an interesting decision, but your goal is to lean left, lean right, or lean center, try and collect as many eggs as you can while trying to avoid... What is it? You're trying to avoid Voltorbs, because Voltorbs can fall and they will stun you and make you lose eggs. And there are 100 eggs falling in total, which makes this game a little bit longer than people were expecting, but it's pretty fun in spite of that, because it means if you wind up missing some, you still have huge opportunities to catch back up. I like it mechanically. I like the lean style of it. I like that your goal is to try and catch as many eggs as you can. My biggest problem with it is just that you're not impacting other players. I like I like mini games that don't feel like single player. This one feels a lot like a single player game. This could be like a great single-player challenge in a normal Pokemon game or something like that. As it is right now, I think this one goes in B tier. It's fun, but it isn't as fun as it could have been. If there were ways for you to throw more Voltorbs at other players or something like that, like say if you were able to catch and toss a Voltorb toward one of the other players instead of their eggs or something like that, that could be fun. That would be really fun. But as it is right now, it's just, can you follow the pattern and can you catch the eggs? And last one of the regular minigames, we have Eager Eevee, and this one also pretty disappointing, I'm not gonna lie. You get 5 opportunities to kind of react to an Apom lifting up a lid. The game calls it a lid. The Apom lifts the lid, and underneath it will be either fruit or a Ferroseed. And if it's fruit, your goal is to run toward the center and collect as much of it as you can. Sometimes there will only be one, and that means whoever gets there first gets the whole thing. Sometimes it'll be like strawberries, and it'll be whoever gets there fastest gets 20, or whoever gets there slowest gets like 1 or something like that. All the fruits have different values, which is pretty cool. There is also a Ferroseed, so if you run toward the center when a Ferroseed is revealed, you have to sit out the next turn, which is a pretty brutal punishment for not... Like, your goal is just react as fast as possible. And if you react as fast as possible to the wrong thing, you're brutally punished. So when playing against real players, you kind of have to hold back and assess what it is. When playing against computers, tough luck. If you wait longer than a second, you're screwed. The game implements a way to try and bait out other players where you can feint a run. So if you press the B button instead of the A button, you kind of rush toward the center, but not all the way, so you kind of back off. So you could try to feint a run early if you want to. It doesn't really work. Like, no one really falls for it, in my opinion. Because you're not watching the other Eevees, you're just watching the lid. You're watching the Apom try to lift the lid, and that's what you're reacting to instead of the other Eevees. So the other Eevees pretending to run toward the center really doesn't do anything. It doesn't kind of trigger that, oh, I need to go now. It could have been fun, I think, if... I don't know. I think this goes in D tier. I think there were ways they could have made this better, but I don't know what they were. It's not that fun of a game, in my opinion. And then the last one, we have the quiz. And I don't really know how to rank the quiz. I'm going to be 100% honest, because the quiz, it's very different based on the difficulties. Sometimes the quiz is like, hey, here's a fact about a Pokemon. And your goal is to just identify which Pokemon it is. And sometimes the game, it asks for very specific knowledge about Pokemon Gold and Silver. I didn't play Pokemon Gold and Silver. I don't really care about Pokemon Gold and Silver. How am I supposed to know what any of these things are? Like, I don't care about the gym leaders or the locations. I'm not gonna know any of that stuff. The hard difficulty is pretty much exclusively Gold and Silver knowledge. Medium difficulty, you kind of get a mix of Pokemon and the Gold and Silver knowledge. And then easy difficulty, not only is it exclusive to Pokemon, but it's also, like, some of the blandest questions ever. Like, what color is Drowsy? Or, I have eyes. I can see what color is yellow. I can see which Pokemon is pink or something like that. Like, it's not that hard. I think overall the quiz, if you're a fan of Pokemon, the quiz... Yeah, if you're a fan of Gold and Silver in particular, the quiz could be higher up, but I think as is, this goes down here in D tier. It's one of the worst minigames, I'd say. And yeah, that is my tier list. I was not expecting that to be as even as it is. Let me go ahead and reorder them within the games themselves. All right, there we go. I've reordered it, so this is, like, within each tier, I think this is the order. And yeah, that's my tier list. There's a lot of games between Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. Like, there's so many. I think 12 plus 9 was 9 plus 12. Yeah, 21 minigames total plus the quiz, so 22 minigames. It's fun. I like the Pokemon Stadium games. I like the minigames of Pokemon Stadium, and I think more people need to be aware of them. If you have the opportunity to play Pokemon Stadium as 1 or 2, try out these minigames. Trust me, they're so much fun. Like, I don't think anybody was expecting them to be as fun as they are. They're just really cool, I'm not gonna lie. Even the worst ones aren't bad. Like, Thundering Dynamo can still be a good time if you know how to have a fun, like, party. If you're with the right people, even the worst games can be solid. And the quiz can also be done with multiple players, so it's instead of racing against the clock, you're racing against other players, which I think is pretty neat. But yeah, all these are... None of them are, like, in a tier so bad that I needed to make an F tier or something like that. I like these games. I like the Pokemon Stadium games. If you haven't had a chance to try them, please do. If you like Mario Party, you're gonna love these. So yeah, that is my tier list. That's my video. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget, I have channel memberships if you want to support the channel. I also have the podcast. If you like the idea of ranked lists like this, go check out Rank Masters, because we discuss a lot of ranked lists like these. We do have plans to make some of our own, but we like discussing other people's ranked lists because that's just more fun to me. I like roasting very bad lists. But yeah, thank you, and have a good day.